It promised so much, and for the most of it, it was fairly forgettable. I'm Chip from the Digital Grandstand, and this is Beyond the Finish Line for the Austrian Grand Prix. Straight from the off, I'll have to say that, to me, the two best performers in this race were absolutely Ricciardo and Grosjean. Both got results that, at first glance, were unachievable for the machines they are driving. Ricciardo splitting the Mercedes-Ferrari battle right in half, while Grosjean taking the best of the rest top position, besting well-oiled teams like Williams and Force India. Let's dissect now how was that possible and, in fact, how every team fared at the Red Bull Ring. The battle at the front should have been a one-on-one affair. Hamilton and Vettel were more than eager to continue their unfinished business from Baku, but for a number of reasons, it was not to be. Firstly, we've learned by Friday that Hamilton was going to switch to a new gearbox, therefore automatically get a 5-place grid drop, so he would not start any higher than 6th. Then, and this is a fascinating insight into the two philosophies behind the Mercedes and the Ferrari machines, each car was favoring one type of tire. The Mercedes was stupidly fast on the ultra-softs, while the Ferrari had much better pace on the slower but more durable super soft. With Hamilton, Mercedes gambled on him starting on the supers. This had two advantages. Firstly, he could go longer than the frontrunners, switching later onto the ultras, and having a much better shot at gaining positions. Secondly, even though it proved not to be the case, there was a serious chance of the race being hit by rain in the later stages. As for the rest of the frontrunners, the two Ferraris, Red Bulls and Pullman Bottas, all of them started on the faster ultrasoft. Two big moments occurred at the start. Bottas almost, but not quite, jumped the lights. He was cleared by the stewards. The rule allows slight movement from the cars between the moment the final light comes on and all 5 going out. Bottas was measured at leaving his grid box at 0.201 seconds after the light went out. The perfect getaway or the luckiest anticipated start? I guess the discussion will carry on for a while. Max Verstappen had a terrible start. He was swamped by 5 cars down to turn 1 and, after a Kvyat-triggered incident, was collected by Alonso's McLaren and he was out after the first lap. Raikkonen and Ricciardo had a great battle in the opening laps, with the Australian emerging on top, while Kimi had to pass and then defend from first Perez and then Hamilton. The battle then separated into two groups. Out in front, Bottas was keeping Vettel at bay with his ultra-softs friendly Merc, while Ricciardo, Raikkonen and, later on Hamilton, were disputing the final podium place. Hamilton's strategy backfired when he was unable to pass Kimi, the traction out of the corners being superior in the Ferrari. Despite having the super softs and therefore able to stretch the first stint, he was called up to switch to ultras rather quickly. Despite being quite further up the road, Ricciardo and Red Bull countered with their own stop. A little bit later, Vettel and then Bottas also pitted, leaving Raikkonen at the front on old and therefore slower tires. The Ferrari were hoping that Kimi will be able to drop back Bottas into the charging Vettel. Remember, the Ferraris were much quicker than the Mercs on super softs. The plan didn't work, as Raikkonen's tires were in such a bad shape that he ran wide in turn 3 and Bottas was able to breeze past. Raikkonen pitted and the order was Bottas, Vettel, Ricciardo, Hamilton, who was going very fast on his ultrasofts, and then Raikkonen. Despite some great battles in the final 5 laps, this will be the order they would finish at the end of the race. Behind them, Grosjean had an amazing weekend overall. Starting and finishing 6th was absolutely amazing for Haas, even though Magnussen was hit by hydraulic pressure issues in the middle of the race and had to retire. A great battle for positions 8, 9 and 10th had the Force India of Ocon defending well from the two Williams cars. Massa and Stroll had appalling qualifying sessions. Not being able to bring the tires up to temperature, they were Q1 casualties and starting P17 and 18 respectively. But a couple of monstrous starts saw both running into the points soon after the start. Massa was putting pressure on Ocon later on in the race, while Stroll had to defend from Palmer and Van Dorn. McLaren, Sauber, Renault and Toro Rosso had awful weekends, all things considered. As was expected really, the track near Spielberg is power dependent, i.e. the engine plays a much bigger role than anywhere else on the calendar. At McLaren, the plan was for Alonso and Van Dorn to switch to a Spec 3 Honda internal combustion engine, but a slight issue in Friday practice had Alonso revert to the old Spec 1. Both racers did well to get into Q2 on Saturday. On race day, Alonso had a great start, as per usual really, but got piled into from behind by Kvyat, who misjudged the braking point into turn 1. Alonso was out, also taking Verstappen with him, while Kvyat was later handed a drive-through penalty for his behavior. Van Dorn was running well throughout the race, at one point challenging Palmer and Stroll for the final point, but he was also handed a penalty for failing to get out of Raikkonen's way while the Ferrari man was lapping him. Verline had to change elements of his power unit, therefore he started from the pit lane, but did very well on Sunday to get ahead of his teammate. In the Renault camp, Hülkenberg struggled all weekend trying to get his tires up to temperature. He worked really hard to get that machine up to Q2, and if not for a slight mistake, he might have got into Q3 even. On race day he was nowhere really, dropping fast at the start and finishing in P13 eventually. Palmer, meanwhile, had a completely different weekend. Struggling on Saturday, he qualified only P16, but had a much better Sunday, battling for the final point scoring position with the likes of Stroll and Van Dorn. In the end, he fell just short in P11. At Toro Rosso, Kvyat's race was ruined by that first corner late braking maneuver and the subsequent penalty, while Sainz had to retire mid-race with an engine failure. And that was the 2017 Austrian Grand Prix, a race that promised so much but eventually delivered so little. Ricciardo's podium was a great surprise for the sport, but also, especially, for the Red Bull fans, while Bottas's win means he is now firmly into the title battle along with Hamilton and Vettel. What are your thoughts of this Grand Prix? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and check back soon for more F1 related content. Or you can always subscribe. I've been Chip. You can find me on Twitter at chip_DGS, and that was Beyond the Finish Line for the 2017 Austrian Grand Prix.